All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're bypassing centuries of traditional narratives to decode an ancient text as a literal, systemic blueprint for human consciousness. We're looking at Surah 14, known as Ibrahim. But instead of the usual approach, we're going to engage with this text purely on its own terms, digging into its linguistic roots and underlying structures. And, when we do that, we discover something incredible. It isn't just some historical recounting. It's actually a profound, data-driven operating system, one that's specifically designed to transition the human mind from a state of total fragmentation into absolute clarity.
Since we are fundamentally uncovering a structural map here, let's quickly go over the agenda we'll follow to understand this fascinating operating system. We'll start with Out of the Darkness, then examine the trap of tradition, unpack a tale of two words, expose the illusion of temptation, analyze Ibrahim's environmental blueprint, and finally, we'll confront the ultimate choice.
So let's kick things off right at the beginning with Section 1, Out of the Darkness, Systemic Extraction.
Right off the bat, what's really interesting is how the text diagnoses the human condition. It doesn't describe it as one single, overarching darkness. Instead, it says we're trapped in a plural state of fragmented illusions. The Arabic word used here is zulumat, and the text consistently uses this in the plural. It represents the manifold, conflicting, human-made socio-religious systems and cognitive biases that basically just place things completely out of their rightful order. Think of it like modern information overload or, endlessly scrolling through completely contradictory feeds. It's the natural state of confusion that our consciousness drifts into when it's left unchecked.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core movement the text actually demands from us. It's a structural extraction from that plural confusion into a single, unified orientation of absolute clarity. So we have zulumat, those plural darknesses that leave us unconscious, lost, and just wandering. But the destination? That's nur, or light. And the text always, without fail, uses light in the singular. It represents absolute brightness and manifest reality. So we aren't talking about simply adopting a new label here. This is a fundamental awakening from inner blindness to inner sight. But of course, whenever a messenger delivers this kind of clarity, humans invariably resist. Which brings us to Section 2, the trap of tradition. Identity versus reality. The text identifies the ultimate trap here as millah. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand we aren't talking about religion in a spiritual sense, but rather an inherited, rigid cultural matrix that demands complete compliance. The root of this word actually refers to an institutionalized socio-religious identity system. You see, truth and clarity operate on objective reality, but human-made frameworks, they operate on identity boundaries. They want you to conform to the tribe. It's honestly remarkably similar to an inescapable corporate culture or a modern algorithmic echo chamber that absolutely demands your conformity. So the point is, human institutional frameworks thrive on those identity boundaries, and they present an ultimatum. Either submit to the artificial dogma or face total exclusion. As verse 13 shows us, the status quo doesn't really bother arguing with facts, it just responds with a threat. It says, we will surely expel you from our land, or you must return to our system. It's the ultimate identity contraction, right? Either blend back into our rigid artificial matrix or be entirely cast out. To help us understand this clash, the text provides a stunningly objective biological metaphor. Let's look at Section 3, a tale of two words, evaluating systems. This builds an incredibly stark dichotomy between a truth-based orientation that scales and produces actual benefit versus an artificial, man-made dogma that's completely devoid of real-world stability. The wholesome word, or kalima tayyiba, is an operating principle anchored in truth. It's like a healthy tree. Its root is firm, it's constantly yielding fruit, and it actually scales to provide tangible benefit. But the corrupt word? It's uprooted. It's an illusion. It has zero stability, it produces absolutely nothing of real value, and it completely collapses under pressure. The text is asking us, very directly, what are you anchoring your reality to? Now, you might be wondering, if artificial systems are so unstable, why on earth do we fall for them? That brings us to Section 4, the illusion of temptation, evaded responsibility. This is arguably the most sobering psychological twist in the entire text. It completely shatters the religious myth of an external cosmic monster forcing us to sin. So yeah, unfortunately, we can't use the whole "the devil made me do it" excuse anymore. The internal voice of distancing, shaitan, has absolutely zero systemic authority. When the final calculations of reality are settled, it basically says, look, I had no compelling force, no hard evidence,
All I did was send an invitation and you willingly accepted. So don't blame me, blame yourselves. By confirming that external temptation is literally just an invitation that we willingly accept, the text places 100% of the accountability directly onto human volition. There is no external scapegoat. You can't blame a society, and you can't blame an external monster. The cognitive pull away from reality actually requires your active participation. So the accountability, it returns entirely to your own locus of control. Knowing all of this, how do we proceed? Well, let's look at Section 5. Ibrahim's environmental blueprint, designing environments. Here is where we finally meet the namesake of the surah, Ibrahim. But he's presented here not merely as a historical figure, but as an active, workable blueprint. He realizes that human centers are totally saturated with asnam. Now, we must understand asnam not just as physical statues, but as any systemic, artificial, societal structures that demand our submission. These are the static, human-molded forms we rely on instead of actual, dynamic reality. To safeguard conscious awareness, Ibrahim knows he literally has to intervene in his physical environment.
So, Ibrahim deliberately engineers his environment. Step 1, he physically extracts his family from those polluted systems. Step 2, he settles in a barren valley, a literal clean slate completely devoid of distractions. Step 3, he establishes a shielded framework to prevent any future contamination. And step 4, he utilizes this newly unpolluted space to maintain a pure, conscious connection.
Ibrahim's ultimate goal for this heavily shielded environment was Salat. And when we look at the root analysis, it reveals that Salat isn't just a mere ritual. It's the continuous active maintenance of our connection with cosmic truth. It's the attentive orientation of our consciousness. By stripping away the noise and the idols of the city, Ibrahim engineered an environment where human attention could remain entirely unmediated and perfectly focused on reality.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the ultimate choice, systemic binary.
This meticulously constructed operating system ultimately forces the reader into a final, completely unavoidable systemic binary. We are shown that our response to reality is pure cause and effect. Gratitude, or shukr, means recognizing exactly where your provision comes from and aligning with it, which naturally leads to an increase. Rejection, or kufr, on the other hand, means covering over reality, denying the source, and living under the total illusion of independence. And the consequence? It isn't some petty punishment, it's just the natural result of cutting yourself off from the source, inevitable constriction and ruin.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I think we can clearly see this isn't a manual for a religious sect. It is a closed-loop methodology demanding a complete reorientation of consciousness. The blueprint is clear and it's highly actionable. Step away from the fragmented, rigid traditions of Milla. Embrace 100% accountability for your choices and your responses. Intentionally structure your mind and your environment to align with reality. And finally, anchor your life entirely on the firm word.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely vital question to reflect on regarding the hidden architecture of our own lives. Are you building your life on a dynamic, wholesome word or a static, human-molded idol? Take a moment today to really look at your beliefs, your habits, and the systems you serve, and ask yourself which tree they really belong to. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this provided a totally new lens through which to view your own structural foundations.